Independent Women's Forum. Hadley Heath Manning joins me now. Hadley, every time I think of great parenting, I think of you. It's so funny because nostalgically, guys my age, we talk about back in the days when we had more freedom than our kids, and we rode our bikes without helmets, and we played on the monkey bars, and sometimes we'd disappear for a few hours. Is this the same thing?
Yeah, I do think that in some sense, all parenting before a certain time was free-range parenting, that parents more or less told their children, go play, and expected that their children could at least make good choices within age-appropriate boundaries. Of course, mom and dad would check in when they think it was appropriate, and that's what the free-range movement is today. I agree with the reporter who sort of paints this as a contrast to helicopter parenting. I do think the intensive parenting trend that we see today is very exhausting for parents and puts a lot of pressure on parents when all that children really need, Charles, and you know this, is to know that they're unconditionally loved, to be safe and provided for, and to be taught, I believe, certain good behaviors and critical thinking. That's the role of a parent. As long as you're doing that, there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah, I think, though, one of the essential tenets of this particular movement, at least from what I've read, though, is that some of those things that you're talking about, that the parent would intervene in terms of teaching the children certain things, that they're left to discern on their own. You kind of go out and you discern right and wrong, and it has just a little bit more of a twist, maybe just a little bit more, quote unquote, independence than I think many parents would think is reasonable for a young child to have at a certain age, at their age.
Right, and parents have to make thousands of judgment calls like this every day for every child that they have in their home. But I would just emphasize that if you're talking about giving children more freedom and more independence, and I believe this is, one of the tenets of free-range parenting, is that freedom is the flip side of responsibility, that you have to be sure that your children are responsible enough to handle the freedom that you're giving them. And this is true outside of parenting too, Charles, and it's something for all Americans to keep in mind. Freedom and responsibility always go together. We give people a lot of freedom without also accepting that they take personal responsibility.
One of my concerns is I feel this could be an offshoot of a movement that began about a decade ago. And every now and then, for instance, recently I heard Vice President Kamala Harris refer to children, the community raising children. And there was a serious movement, and it's still going on beneath the surface, where you really the kids are not yours. I think there's a movement where they want legally where children will not be yours. They will belong to the community. That worries me. That frightens me. Not everyone in the community has my values or even my children's best interests in mind. So I feel like this is a part and parcel of sort of that movement. While, again, I long for the nostalgic days of going out and playing and riding my bike all day. I don't know that if we take it a step further, that now these kids belong to the community and no longer any particular household.
Well, I'm sure that defenders of free-range parenting would say that the busybodies who report on the kids playing alone at the playground or walking home from school by themselves, that those are actually the folks who side with Kamala Harris, who say it takes a village and we all need to keep an eye on other people's children, instead of entrusting individual parents to make those decisions about what their children should be able to handle. But I agree with you, Charles. I think the concept of the village raising the children can only be successful when we think about it in terms of a society, a community, and not a government. Those two things are very different. We have to keep those lines very clear. That yes, when my neighbors check in on my kids, that's a nice, kind thing for them to do. They're not expected to raise my kids. Only I can do that. But I also don't want the government stepping in and saying, we're going to provide for your children and we know what's best for them. You don't.
All right. Well, I think this is something we're going to end up talking about a little bit more because people are trying to figure different things out. Again, there's a nostalgia part. There's a movement now that feels like there's more crime out there. Our kids are more vulnerable. But I really appreciate having this conversation with you, Hadley. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Sure. Thanks, Charles.
All right.
Hey, you too.